welcome to our conversation about a topic that is very timely, is very important, and I look forward to engaging in a conversation. We are looking forward to engaging in a conversation with those of you on this call about how, and I'm sharing my screen now, how Biotrade can serve as a tool to advance food security and gender equality in the Peruvian rainforest. My colleagues on this call, on this panel, and I, Professor Rudbeck and Professor Ivanova, have been conducting field research in Peru on precisely this topic over the last 3 years, with a slight hiatus because of the pandemic. But we were thrilled to continue our research with conversations with producers and entrepreneurs this past August. And over the next 40 minutes or so, we will be sharing the findings, the preliminary findings of our research with you, and we look forward to your feedback. Now, our presentation is divided into 3 parts. First, we will be discussing the conflictual nature, conflictual context of our research. While Biotrade can serve as a very powerful tool for social development and social transformation, it is taking place against a backdrop, against conflicts over the exploitation of natural resources. Professor Rudbeck will be sharing more about this in just a few moments. Then we will be discussing Biotrade, giving you a more general idea what we mean by Biotrade as a new approach to agricultural production. And finally, we will be sharing the results of our study, which we call the socioeconomic impact of Biotrade in the Ucayali region. Now, a snapshot of our program. Why are we interested in this subject? Well, first of all, we really wanted to explore the potential of Biotrade to drive social development and environmental sustainability. Everybody's talking about Biotrade, organic trade, fair trade, and we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and really see kind of what are the consequences, what are the positive benefits of Biotrade? Are there any positive benefits? And if we want to look at positive side effects and positive consequences, what themes, what issue areas are we going to be looking at? And we decided to look at 2 very specific sociological fields. One is gender equality, the other one is food security. At the same time, we wanted to investigate what is the potential of Biotrade to reduce dependence on monocropping and extractive activities in Peru. About 40 million people live in regions of the tropical rainforest in South America. So a lot of these, millions of these 40 million, 10, 20%, depend on monocropping and extractive activities, which of course, as we will see later on, have very serious economic, political, cultural, and social side effects. We wanted to see kind of to what extent can Biotrade move the needle away from monocropping and extractive activities. So our research question then is Biotrade a tool to enhance rainforest conservation, food security, and women's empowerment? A snapshot of our methodology. We first conducted desk research to get a better idea of, what is going on, what does the literature say, where are we in terms of our collective knowledge. Then we put together a research project, which was approved by the IRB here at NYU and was funded, thank you, by the Dean's Office at SPS. We conducted then field research through structured interviews with 25 producers and entrepreneurs in 2019 and in 2022 in Ucayali province within 3 value chains. Professor Ivanova, who is an expert on sustainability and Biotrade, suggested that we focus on cocoa, camu camu, and native ajís. More about this later. We also focused on businesses, not just on the production side, but also on the business side. And that has to do with integration into the global production, consumption, and value chain. And we were discussing the impact of Biotrade with an organization called Pruébalo 1 and 2, Superfrio, Pimental, Yucao, Amazon World, and ONSA. more details later. The questions that we were asking, and this is what Professor Rudbeck will walk us through a little bit later on, are questions about food security, income, food affordability, and food safety. The questions that I asked in my interviews and in my conversations regarding gender equality related to women's subjective sense of greater equality in the family or in relationships, whether they have greater decision-making power within the family, whether they have a higher disposable income, and sadly, because it is very prevalent in Peru, also if they saw a reduction in domestic violence, and we'll share the findings a little bit later. Now, before I turn it over to Professor Rudbeck to provide the political and economic context for our conversation, just a few words about Ucayali province. Ucayali is a region, it's a province, it's a department in Peru. The red arrow points at it. As you can see, it borders Brazil, Acre province in Brazil. It's approximately the size of Kentucky, about 39,000 square miles, with a population of roughly 500,000. The capital is Pucallpa, which is where we conducted most of our interviews, alongside smaller towns such as Campo Verde and San Alejandro. The poverty rate is approximately 70%, which is very, very high. So our project also, has some economic and moral urgency. And I would now like to turn it over to Professor Rudbeck to share his insight on how biotrade is taking place within the conflicts over resources in the Amazon. Jens, you have the stage. Jens, you're on mute.
All right, thank you. So what we wanted to do is to kind of give you a setting for where we are trying to see if biotrade can make an impact on deforestation. And so I wanted kind of to take you back to August 2019, where images and data from the Brazilian Space Agency came out, and it led to front page stories across the world. Because what the data showed us was that there were, at that point, about 73,000 fires raging across the Amazon. And compared to previous years, that was up by almost 84%. And if you go back to when the space agency started to track the numbers, it was double the numbers. So it led to a huge debate across the world about what to do. And the French President Emmanuel Macron stepped up to the scene and offered to send French firefighters to Brazil to extinguish the flames. Although this was a very sincere and I believe also a good faith offer, the president of Brazil did not take this lightly. He accused France of neo-colonial thinking, because the real reasons for the fires were poverty and the way that food is produced in the world. And so there was no way that the fires in themselves, just by stopping them, would end them, because as long as poverty runs deep and we produce the food in the world the way that we do, the fires would keep raging. And so I think this kind of sets the debate that we are trying to tackle in kind of a strong relief, as you have on the one side an attempt to grow economic or increase economic growth rates, and on the other side also fight poverty. And then you're up against biodiversity and trying to protect the environment and also prevent climate change over time. And yeah, you can go to the next slide. This is also something that is supported by our research finding, or by research finding that the rainforest is now deeply threatened. A report came out last year that showed that 18% of the area of the Amazon had been converted into other land use, and almost 16 or 17% had been degraded by logging. And if you kind of look at the map, you can see where the lighter the area, the more deforestation has taken place. And we are at a point where deforestation might have reached a point where there is no kind of turning back. That regeneration of the Amazon is not possible anymore. And that may have tremendous economic consequences, not just ecological consequences, but also economic consequences, because it's believed that the rainforest in itself provides about $4 trillion of what's called ecosystem services, such as providing fresh water, and that might, if we continue to deforest the way we do, it might lead to a loss of $1 trillion. So what I wanted to do is kind of look into the causes of deforestation and the economics that are linked to it. So we're going to look into monocropping, illegal gold mining, illegal logging, and finally coca production. And so if you look at monocropping across the Peruvian Amazon, that has increased significantly. And it's an important issue for Peru that has signed on to the Paris Agreement and has to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 40% by the year 2050. Because monocropping in Peru accounts for about 50% of greenhouse gas emissions. And because there has not been a strong regulation around deforestation or forestation as such, then it has led to a cutting down of the forest and an increase in monocropping. If you go to gold mining, the way that you have to explain how gold is mined nowadays, it's not that we have a large number of gold mines where you kind of dig it out with a shovel or a hack. Today, gold is fine powder on the bottoms of rivers. It has been washed down into the rivers. And so the way that the gold is mined is that you kind of take a diesel engine from a truck and then pump a large amount of water and mud through a sieve. And then you have a little specks of gold here and there, but you can't see it because it's in the mud. So what you do is you add mercury to the blend of mud and gold, and then mercury binds with gold. So now you have little nuggets, and then you take those nuggets and you heat them up, and then mercury melts before gold, and so that's the way you isolate the gold. But of course, that means that the mercury is either evaporates or is let back into the river and into the water. So you have seen a significant increase of gold mining recently because of COVID has pushed up the prices of gold, but it has also pushed people into poverty. And so you have the combined of the deforestation that happens as a result of the gold mining, but also the pollution of the area by mercury. So there has been studies that have found high levels of mercury in the fish in the rivers, but also some population has been exposed to high levels of mercury. So that's aside from the monocropping, you have gold mining. And then the third issue is illegal logging. And again, because of the lack of classification of forest in Peru, you have seen a large amount of logging, and it's kind of linked also to corruption. That the former president of the Ucayali region, where we conduct our studies, has been cited more than 100 times for various irregularities linked to logging. And the former vice president has also been fined for illegal logging. And so it's linked to not just the lack of regulations, but also to corruption. And about 40% of a report showed that about 40% of the wood that was exported from Peru was illegally sourced. And particularly one vessel, as you can see there in the photos, when the papers were the papers were investigated from that specific ship, it showed as much as 96% of the timber was illegally shipped, and it went to the United States and also to the Dominican Republic. And so it might have lost as much as some says about $112 million lost because of the illegal logging, but as other numbers as much as $250 million. And so there's huge sums that we are talking about. Next slide. But of course, compared to cocoa production, it's more money. So Peru is the second largest cocaine producers in the world. The land that is set aside for cocoa production has gone up, particularly around the COVID pandemic that has pushed even more people into poverty. And the combined value of the coca production in Peru, if it was sold on the US market, would be somewhere between 14 and 36 billion dollars if it all went to the United States. So those are the four main areas of conflict and the economics that drive the deforestation in Peru. And so we are trying to understand whether the biotrade could be an alternative income for Peruvians, and then that would lessen this type of deforestation. Over to you, Yuvita.
Thank you, Jens. So a lot of problems. We have illegal cocoa production, illegal mining, infrastructure, deforestation. What will be the alternative? The issue of deforestation is a very complex issue, and there is no direct cause for this. It's a multiple causes answer. But what will be the alternative? In Peru, we have 4 large agriculture commodities produced in the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. This is cocoa, palm oil, cattle, and coffee. But there is also another alternative to actually not only deforestation, but also poverty, because deforestation is also driving numbers of poverty up. And this is biotrade. Biotrade is actually an activity created in United Nations Trade and Development Organization that aims to promote the production and commercialization of biodiversity-based products and ingredients. In the beginning, this was initiative that was aiming to promote mostly native biodiversity products and ingredients. And this is exactly some of them what Silvia mentioned. This is ají nativos, or native chilies. Very delicious. The native camu camu, which is a palm tree, small palm tree, aguaje, etc., etc. But maybe you know better the quinoa, which is more from the Andean region, and you know maybe maca, which is also from the Andean region. So these are the native biodiversity-based products, which are actually wild. And they are an alternative to all this monocropping, which also Jens mentioned. Data is not a label, it's not a standard, it's not like the organic or the fair trade standard. It's just an approach that aims to conserve biodiversity, but also to give a means for people, for producers, agriculture workers in the Peruvian Amazon to make a living. So we don't only want to preserve the Amazon, but we want the golden middle way, kind of to have the sustainable use of the biodiversity. And what you can see also worldwide, there are 60 countries. Peru is part of this initiative, the Biotrade initiative, where Biotrade is implemented. Sales of Biotrade companies association are more than 5 billion euros for 2019, and I think there was a drop down during COVID, but now numbers are going up, and there are more than 5 billion jobs created. We are not talking only about products, we're talking also about services, ecosystem services, or also ecotourism, which I think I saw the Amazon tour company, which provides exactly this ecotourism services. Next slide, please. So how is this initiative regulated in Peru? There is a national Biotrade program that was created in 2003, actually one of the first worldwide, together with a program in Vietnam and Uganda, also promoted by the United Nations Trade and Development Organization, and implemented also by the Peruvian Amazon Research Institute. Last year, sales of Peruvian Biotrade products, which actually is not exactly sales, they're more export, because mostly all of the products are going to international markets. Locally, products are not certified locally. You can still find very little organic or fair trade certified products. Almost all the products that are organic or fair trade, they are exported, and sales are around 500 million annually, which represents, of course, less than 1% of the total Peruvian export. Direct markets for these products are US, and you can see also in Whole Foods a lot of the Peruvian Brazil nuts, a lot of the quinoa, a lot of also the camu camu and aguaje products, but also Europe and Japan. Next slide, please. So there is a bad response and there is a good response to poverty through biodiversity. I will argue that the bad response, unfortunately, has been the illegal coca production. For example, I say illegal because in Peru there is also legal coca production. You know that there is a tradition, the coca leaf chewing, which is kind of very ancestral and traditional knowledge in it, and used also in a lot of ceremony. But there is also illegal coca production that is used for the production of cocaine, and this is the bad response. There are a lot of children also working, there are a lot of chemicals also used, which is also contaminating the soil. Next one, please. But we have also a good response, and one of the good responses is with the cacao beans, value-added product that is chocolate. And 10 years ago there was not a single chocolate brand in Peru, but now companies are starting not only to sell the raw product, the cacao beans, but they're starting also to produce this totally delicious chocolate that use also some of these biodiversity products like the camu camu. You have also this chocolate from the camu camu, and camu camu has a lot of vitamin also C, which makes even the chocolate more nutritive. So there's also this good response to poverty. Biotrade, we want to argue also with this study that will continue, that with Biotrade we can have positive economic indicators like job creations, like increase of income. We can have also a positive environmental impact like conservation of biodiversity, since most of the areas or most of the crops are wild, so you don't have to use chemicals and you don't have to use also fertilizers. And we'll argue also that there is a positive social side of the Biotrade businesses in Ucayali region in terms of gender and food security. Next one, please, or I think, yes. And back to you, Jens. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. Yeah, so this was kind of the presentation of Biotrade and what it is. Then what we are looking into is, among other things, the impact, potential impact of Biotrade on food security, and the COVID pandemic had a significant impact on food security in Peru. The latest numbers from the UN, from their Food and Agriculture Organization, put the number of people that are food insecure in Peru, around 16.6 million, which is up by more than 50% during the pandemic. And it's particularly linked to poverty. As people have been pushed into poverty, they will also become food insecure. And so the project that we are undertaking is an attempt to look into how could Biotrade impact, or how does Biotrade impact on people's food security, and could that be an incentive for people to, instead of engaging in the economic activities that I talked about, might switch in and become Biotrade trade farmers. And so there are kind of two elements to it. One is food security on a national level. And so the way that the food system operates today is that Peru produce a lot of, or engaging in crops, and then those are sold on the global market, and then that is used to import other types of food that is needed in Peru. But Biotrade enables where you, instead of having monocrops, you grow something that is indigenous to people dietary needs, and that might then change their food diversity. And so we're also looking at it at a level of individual farmers, and whether they can generate a higher income from Biotrade. And there's a lot of examples of specific crops that have generated a lot of interest in the West and have become export success. Like Jovita mentioned, quinoa, but also acai, the berry from Brazil, or the maca you might have heard about. That they have all become export success. And there's a lot of these types of fruits and vegetables in the Amazon that's unknown. And we're looking into these two. One is camu camu, and the other one is the chili, the ají. And so particularly camu camu might be sold as a superfood on the Western markets, because it has this enormous content of C vitamin. It's 207 milligrams per 100 grams. And just to contrast that to lemons, which is often kind of put forward as a fruit that has high vitamin C content, it is 32 times higher. And so it also has antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. And so if these camu as a berry could be promoted as a health food in the West, it might become another success. So yeah, over to you, Silvia.
Thank you so much, Jens. Now let's take a brief look at the second issue that motivated our study. We were just learning a little bit more about food security in Peru, or the lack thereof. Gender equity. How is Biotrade related to gender equity? Can it be, I want to underline the word can it be an effective tool for the economic and social empowerment of women? The short answer is yes, but. There are plenty of examples around the world, primarily in Africa, where Biotrade businesses have served as a tool for the economic and social empowerment of women in small communities. There are plenty of examples in Namibia, in Uganda, in Tanzania, where women have created, local women have created very prosperous businesses, local businesses, sometimes sub-regional businesses, with local products that they have sold on the market, or they have sold in urban areas. Why is that? Why do we consider Biotrade a potential tool? Women, first of all, in almost all countries around the world, especially when they live in rural areas, have centuries-long ancestral and traditional knowledge on how to use biodiversity in a sustainable manner. Through, for instance, in the case of the Amazon, medicinal and aromatic plants. Women, historically, traditionally, in a very gendered manner, are the caregivers of the family. They are responsible for food production, for keeping food on the table. So they are very knowledgeable knowledgeable about how to use products from local forests, from other agricultural products to feed their families in a sustainable manner. The second way in which Biotrade can serve as a potential tool for the economic and social empowerment of women is because native biodiversity-based businesses are operating under sustainability standards. We call that in the United States organic or fair trade, because they promote at the same time values such as fairness and equal burden sharing and generational responsibility, which very often translates into ideational and attitudinal change or behavioral change towards women and gender equity. Women are then more likely to be considered equal partners in a relationship or equal partners in a community, or can be entrusted, and I'm using air quotes here, entrusted with decision-making power in villages or in rural areas or even in urban areas, but our concern is primarily rural areas. Secondarily, as part of national or global value chains, these businesses tap into women's expertise as the community's food producers, as I mentioned earlier, and raise their status as international partners. Very often insist, trying to promote social responsibility, trying to promote human rights and gender equality as universal human rights. They train women in sought-after organic production processes and demand their inclusion in decision-making roles in decision-making fora. So this is to say, just by participating as entrepreneurs in Biotrade, very often, especially if there are relationships with global businesses or European or American businesses, to name, to just give two examples, women's status is enhanced. They attain prestige as capable experts in their own right. Furthermore, bio, or what we sometimes call artisanal products, popular in the global north, at Whole Foods or at 10,000 Villages or at other health food stores, for instance, yield higher incomes for the family, thus again raising women's prestige and bargaining power. Now, armed with this kind of contextual knowledge, we'd now like to walk you through our actual study, which we have termed the socioeconomic impact of Biotrade in the Ucayali region. And here you see at the central market, at the central plaza in Pucallpa, a very colorful sign. Pucallpa is a very popular, it's the regional capital. It's a very, very popular spot for many visitors to stop by before they head further into the rainforest. So just to recap, our research question was, is Biotrade an effective tool for rainforest conservation, food security, and women's empowerment? We conducted field research in Pucallpa, in Campo Verde, and in San Alejandro, all in Ucayali province, 2 weeks each in August 2019 and August 2022, so just about a month and a half ago. The products and the value chains that we were looking at, and they have already been very briefly described by Jovita and Jens, were the Amazonian superfruit camu camu, and it's delicious. If you haven't had a chance to try it, I can really recommend trying it as a cocktail, as a fruit, as pulp, as ice cream. It's delicious. Furthermore, cacao, ají, which is pepper, aguaje, which is it's a delicious local fruit. It tastes a little bit like mango, cocona, honey, and essential oils. We conducted structured interviews approved by NYU's IRB with 25 producers and entrepreneurs, roughly. It was about 20 women and 5 men because it was sometimes a coming and going and kind of people joining the conversation. In Pucallpa, Campo Verde, and San Alejandro. And these are just the list. This is just the list of some of the businesses that we spoke with: Pruébalo, Asociación Pimental, Cooperativa Diálogo de Camu Camu, UCAO, ONSA, Colpa de Loros, and Amazon World, which was mentioned earlier by Jovita. The interviewees were selected based on their products, obviously, their commitments to sustainability and biotrade, and their participation in biotrade businesses, and their availability. Now, here are just a few of the pictures that we took with permission. We're sharing with permission of some of the producers. This was in Pruébalo 1. It's a shop where women producers are selling their products that are all based on or primarily using local native products. Here you see on the left-hand side essential oils. In the middle, you see camu camu. Camu camu usually comes out as kind of a bright pinkish pulp and liqueur. And on the right-hand side, another producer, another businesswoman who also shared with us the challenges that women business leaders, women entrepreneurs are facing in Peru, anything from accessing credit to holding title to land, to registering their businesses for a tax ID. So very, very interesting kind of challenges that women producers are facing that, you know, sometimes men are not. And she's producing primarily soap and cosmetic products. To more different types of women entrepreneurs in Pucallpa, we conducted extensive interviews with both of them. On the left, wonderful CEO Carolina Guadalupe. She's the chief of Super Frio, makes delicious ice cream, all locally produced using local products. Of course, we tried them all. So when you go to Pucallpa next time, be sure to stop by Super Frio and or try some of the ice cream. It's absolutely delicious. It's without any kind of preservatives, anything, you know, that, you know, whose names you can't pronounce. And on the right-hand side, Senora Blanca Perez Morey, she is the head, the chef, the owneress and the chef of the Restaurante El Tuyuyo, also in Pucallpa, very, very famous in the region of Pucallpa. She likewise uses almost exclusively, you know, as possible, local and native products. And in her kitchen, she tries to employ only women staff. So that's another example of women's empowerment. Now, just moving quickly through the next slides, just to give you an idea what it was like in our research and in our conversations. Here we are learning about cocoa and camu camu production from producers in Ucayali. The young woman here on the left-hand side with the dark hair, just a shout out, her name is Maria Claudia. She served for many interviews as our interpreter when our Spanish wasn't good enough. So big shout outs to Maria Claudia. And here on the right-hand side, you see Jovita speaking with one of the leaders in the local camu camu production. And, you know, they're kind of examining a camu camu tree. Again, last images just to give you an idea of kind of the range of biodiversity-based businesses. This is the owneress and the foundress and the owneress of the Ucao coffee shop in Pucallpa. She was one of the first women to produce cacao and chocolates, delicious chocolates and coffee and milkshakes in a systematic manner, and she built her entire business in her coffee business, cafe business in Pucallpa around, you know, chocolates and cocoa products, and the chocolate is delicious. And last but not least, on the right-hand side, you see Yani Villacorta, the founding mother and the owneress of Onsa. She's producing harina, she's producing coffee liqueur, very delicious, and other local products. We had lots of conversations with women leaders of cooperativas and producers in San Alejandro and in Campo Verde as well, which we both kind of asked for their input on food security as well as on the impact of Biotrade on gender equality. And Jens will now discuss the findings regarding food security, and I will follow up with our findings regarding gender equality. Jens?
Sure. Thank you, Silvia. So there were some issues in terms of Biotrade and both in terms of the price stability, whereas, for example, fair trade guarantees farmers a certain price vis-a-vis the world market price of a product. That does not exist for Biotrade. And so one of the things that we found was that, particularly around camu camu, that the price have gone up and down a lot. So it's very unstable. Before the COVID pandemic, it was $3 per kilo, and during the pandemic, it fell to just 50 cents. So that made income very unstable. And of course, if one of the things that Biotrade is supposed to, by pulling people out of the other forms of activities that we have described, is that their income is higher. So if they can't be guaranteed a higher income, it might be difficult to persuade them to take up Biotrade. Another issue with scaling up is transportation cost. Particularly when we interviewed the ají farmers, that they were mostly producing for the local Pucallpa market. They wanted to expand to Lima and beyond, but if they brought their products to Lima, they would also have to pay for storage. And that in itself was a cost they were not willing to undertake in order to increase their markets. So that was another thing. Camu Camu is sold to an export company called Sanshin, would then export to the Japanese market. And here one of the issues are how to preserve the berry before it reaches the Japanese markets. And so there needed to be some investment in technology, particularly around freeze drying and also what's called spray drying. And so that was another issue that the farmers had to deal with. Also, within Biotrade, it is supposed to be ecological, so without use of artificial fertilizers, chemicals, and so on. But we were told that in order to make the Camu Camu look more inviting, chlorine was used in order to make it more brightly red. Not, of course, in toxic levels, but still it's a use of chemicals that is not supposed to take place. And then finally, also in terms of food safety, we were told, so a lot of the Camu Camu grows along the river, and the Ucayali River has sort of created a laguna or a kind of a lake. When it has twisted and turned, it kind of cut itself off from the major river and then created this large laguna. And high levels of wastewater from the local hospital had been found in Laguna, also challenging this notion of biotrade or an ecological and food safety as well. And the final thing that we also found in terms of making biotrade something that farmers might transition into is that for the young generation, farming, farm work, and also field are associated with poverty. And so how do you generate interest in becoming a farmer if the young people are seeing this kind of they want a different approach to life than their parents? They don't want to be farmers. So those are kind of our main takeaways from the study.
Thank you so much, Jens. Now, what are the main takeaways regarding the potential of biotrade to drive women's empowerment and gender equality? In a nutshell, the jury is out. What we have gleaned from our numerous interviews and conversations, and also from our own experience, just interacting with many of the people in the production process in Ucayali, women play a very active role in the production and commercialization of native biodiversity-based products. They're active participants in the bioeconomy and the economic development of Ucayali. So they're real drivers behind that. They're entrepreneurs adding value to the product, such as turning cacao beans into chocolate, as we saw with Ucao, Amazonian fruits into ice cream, such as super frio, Camu Camu into juice or liqueur, and essential oils into ingredients for cosmetic products, to give just a few examples. Yet, from our interviews, as I said earlier, we were not able to establish a clear-cut causal relationship between participation in biotrade and greater gender equality. What we have found in the overwhelming majority in our conversations with the producers, work in the production process for most women is a second job. In addition to that, they take on this job for a couple of hours every day. Many work from 6 a.m. to 11 in the morning, for instance, and then in the afternoon, they do the household duties when their children come back from school and work and farm their own plots. So most of the women in the production process that we spoke with actually owned land in their own right and owned land themselves that they are planting food products for. So it's subsistence farming for the most part, with what is extra gets sold on the market. And Jens shared earlier that the transportation issues a real serious concern for women who want to scale up their small businesses, or even just to sell their products on the market. Women generally do not keep the money that they're making in the production process to themselves. Women's wages become part of the household budget, and as such, you pay for education expenses, for children's expenses, for food, for health expenses, for transportation. So there isn't kind of a sense that many of the women can build their own nest egg, first of all, because payment is rather low. It's backbreaking work, working, in the boiling Amazonian heat, picking ají, picking camu camu. The women make it depends on how much they work, but between 5, 6, and sometimes 10 hours, depending on the need and depending on the availability, between 50 and 100 soles per day. Now, $1 is approximately 4 soles. So, you do the math. That is not very much, even, in terms of purchasing power parity. The products, secondarily, are sold mostly locally, and access to international markets is difficult and costly, especially if you're just starting out. And the credit availability, and that is something that I alluded to earlier, is just not there for many women. One, because banks demand collateral and sometimes extortionate interest rates for credits, just to buy fertilizer, or even if it's organic fertilizer, or any kind of motorcycles, to make production and to make transportation easier. It is likewise very difficult to scale up without a tax registration, ID, and formal accounting. And many people, for historical reasons and experiences with the government, and already a low income, don't really want to register their businesses. They don't want to pay tax, and I don't blame them. I mean, if you're dealing with, or if you're faced with enormous corruption and already a small income, I mean, you don't want to see 20 or 30% of your income just disappear. I think kind of the importance of being part of the formal economy and having a tax ID and paying taxes, I think the necessity and the benefits for that need to be communicated so much better. And last but not least, I want to end on a very positive note for my part of the project. All women without exception, irrespective of sometimes the very challenging personal situations that they find themselves in, all women expressed a very high degree of resourcefulness, of determination, of resilience, independence, and self-confidence. It is really an attitude of, we can make this work, and we will make this work, and we can do this. Now, I would like to turn it over to Jovita to summarize for us the principal takeaways of our project as a holistic project, and then she will lead us into the Q&A. Jovita?
Thank you, Silvia. Yes, maybe just to do the introduction to Q&A session, I would love to hear also the questions of everybody in the room. So you have heard that there are a lot of problems in the Amazon, the rainforest, and the cause, the main cause of deforestation, of illegal coca growing, of change of land use is poverty. How you fight poverty, how you contribute also to sustainable rural development in the Amazon rainforest. One of the alternatives is biotrade, which is exactly the trade with this biodiversity, native or not native products and ingredients, but also ecosystem services in the rainforest, like ecotourism. We believe that biotrade has the potential to increase food security, but also nutrition in the region. We believe that also biotrade can be a driver to gender equality. We have talked with women that work in conventional companies in the Ucayali, and also in this companies under the Biotrade approach, organic and fair trade certified. And we have seen also the changes, what this more holistical use of biodiversity brings also to women. Our data is still very limited. It's also a lot of limitation to collect data in the Peruvian Amazon. But we are starting also with plans for the next interview next year, also to produce entrepreneurs in Ucayali, so we can find more on specific indicators on gender, such as violence, which we know that is quite high in the Peruvian Amazon, and also on food security, considering also all this mega biodiversity which Ucayali has. And I'm opening the Q&A section, and will be very interested to hear your feedback about the project, the presentation, and your questions. Thank you very much.